Okay guys, so we are going to go on to our last sheet of paper. And so this one here, we are going to label again. I'm going to divide that up into 3. My hands are so messy, they're getting this paper dirty. So this one is going to be impasto. Kind of sounds like pasta, but it's not. Scumbling. And then we are just gonna do texture tools. Okay? So to get started with this one, you are going to absolutely need a popsicle stick to get started with your painting. So I'm actually going to just wipe this one off that I've been using. So what impasto means is it's going to be thick paint, okay? So like you can see the paint on here, and this is an example of that. If I you can kind of see it. It's very thick, okay? And it just creates kind of a cool texture with it. So this is kind of supposed to be like an ocean wave. So I'll show you how to do a couple of that. So on this example of my painting, I've actually used some of that impasto technique on the cactus itself. You can kind of see that a little bit. And on these kind of abstracted blossom flowers, okay? So you can use it to just kind of create a different type of detail. So once again, I'm going to divide this one up into 2 sections because I want you guys to try this a couple of different times. So I'm going to show you how to do this kind of wave effect as one of them. So I'm just going to start by drawing a wave shape. Okay? So I am going to, and typically we would do these with a palette knife. I don't have enough of those for you guys, so we're just going to use a popsicle stick, which will work just as good. So for this one, it's very similar to that loaded paintbrush technique. So you might want to scoop some of the colors onto your palette that you are going to be using. So I know I'm going to be using a bunch of white, and then I'm going to take some blue just for now and scoop those there. So I'm going to start with a ton of paint on here, and I'm just going to kind of rub it on. And so it's not going to be smooth and blended. I know a lot of you guys like to kind of paint like that, but this is a technique that you should actually be able to see the texture of the paint. So I don't have a whole lot of paint on there yet, but you can already see that texture, okay? So now if I come in and I make a little bit of that blue, I'm gonna come in and I'm just gonna go over top. So I didn't blend before. I'm blending on the paper. In different directions, we'll do different things, okay? So now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to fill in the background using some purple. Be careful not to mix into that front image that you just did. Ideally, you'd probably wait for it to dry a little bit, but it's just practice. It's okay. So I'm going to use some more of that dark blue. Okay, so you might see that it looks a little messy, but it's okay. I want you guys to kind of try that out and see what you can come up with. Now, for down here, you guys can have an option of what you want to do. If you want to create like, maybe you want to create something like a flower, or maybe you just want to practice a technique without worrying about actually making a shape. Maybe, because impasto is a really good one to kind of fill in the background of something. So if you don't want to worry about actually making something for that second one or have it look like something. I just lost my popsicle stick. I'm going crazy, guys. Well, I'll use my, oh, here it is. Okay, so just kind of that same thing, you could just fill in the background. And guys, I'm wiping off my stick every time I dip it in to a new paint color. So this could be an easy way to add in a little texture, blend in colors together. Gotta add a pop of this red just to give it a little bit of something else. So go ahead, try out that impasto technique and kind of see how that one works. Okay, so for this next one, we are going to try a technique that is called scumbling. So you could do this over any type of background. So this one was actually like a wash background that I did scumbling over, and I did these little cloud details over top of it that I just kind of liked the look of a little bit. But it's going to create an interesting texture, and I'm going to give you a couple options for this. So you might want to grab a sponge from over by the sink when it's time to try this one. So I'm going to go ahead and just paint a solid color down. I'll kind of continue to just do that cloud shape that I already have going. So I just kind of mix some colors together. This isn't super thick. So I'm going to get back to this little swatch here in a second. But down here, so what scumbling is it's just putting a little bit of paint on your brush and like you're kind of dotting with it, okay? So you can do this with a big or a small brush and make sure it's pretty dry when you do it. So for instance, if I'm taking this black paint here, whoa, things are getting wild. So if I'm going across, I'm just going to be adding some texture over top. So it works best if you have less paint, actually. As you can see here, it's getting pretty dark. Let's see if you can see that better. There you go. Bring in focus. So it'll create, so we want it to be a little bit thinner, like that. Okay, so I was using too much paint at first. Let me focus that for you. Okay. So, like I said, it would work really, really well over those clouds, or to make little clouds. So if I'm using kind of this white color, I'm going to kind of wipe it off. And try that technique over top. So you guys can actually blend colors together with this too. Like if I wanted to add a little bit of blue. So it's just a different way to add some variety, some texture to your pieces to create an interesting effect, okay? So like I said, you could use a sponge too, just by dipping into the paint a little bit. I'm going to use kind of this blue so you guys can see it. So that's going to have kind of a very similar effect. You just want a small piece, and that's just going to create a pretty nice texture that you can experiment with a little bit. I'll let this focus. Okay, so go ahead and take some time to practice that scumbling technique using a brush, and if you want to, you can use a little bit of a sponge. Okay, so this last one on this page that I just absolutely love is using texture tools. And so for this, it doesn't really matter what you choose to do. I am just going to lay down a couple of colors on my paper. I'm just going to brush this right on. Try it a couple of times. So you want enough paint. This isn't gonna work if you're using like a thin wash or something like that. But I am just going to brush together. And I personally think it looks better when you're blending colors together anyway for this one, just because it provides a little bit more contrast. So then you can take one of these scraper paint tools. I'll show you what that one's like for this first one, and then I'll show you what happens with the fork for the bottom. So these come in a lot of different shapes, and they're over by the sink too. But all you do then is you make sure that you put it down. Don't do it on the side like this. And you just kind of run it through, and it's going to create a nice little texture. Okay, you guys got to make sure that you rinse these off at the end. Otherwise, it'll build up like this one here, which just looks terrible. Okay, so please clean that up for me. So if I'm just using one color, so I'm just going to use black because you'll really be able to see it. It's going to just kind of scrape the paper underneath. But the fork, you can have a little bit more control with. And you guys are not just limited to like the fork and the texture tool. You could use, so like crisscross patterns are kind of cool. So you can kind of see that quite a bit. But you could use like the back of your paintbrush or your popsicle stick too. Okay? So take some time to explore that using those texture tools for the texture technique. Okay, so now that this one is dry, we can go ahead and finish this up. So you're going to need a paper towel, and I'm going to show you this a couple of different ways. So I'm going to take my paper towel and dip right in here and just wipe over the surface. And what that does is it's just catching the textured areas. And the more you rub it in, the more like it kind of blends in. But you can see that adds just a really cool effect to it. So let me show you with another color what it would do. I'm gonna use purple. So this looks really cool with like metallic colors like golds and bronzes. So you can see that it just adds a little bit more detail to it. So I'm going to do that same thing over here with the sand, so don't practice this one yet. So this one I'm going to do a little yellow and a little white. I'm just going to rub over the top. So this one is going to be a little bit more textured, but it can kind of still create some of those cool results and marks. So I'll do this last one. If you get too much like I did there, a couple options: take a clean space in your paper towel and just wipe it more, or just go over with that original color you were using, like the yellow or the pink, to kind of help spread that out a little bit. So you guys can take some time now to finish your last two techniques and try those out. Okay, so after your techniques are all done, I want to know what your favorite one is so far. We've looked at 9 different ones, but in your sketchbook, you are going to start planning for your design that you are going to make on your canvas. Let me grab mine. So as you're doing this, I just want you to do this in your sketchbook. Nobody's going to get a canvas until I'm back and give it to you. But go ahead and start planning out what techniques you would like to use where. So actually come up with a diagram of your painting that you want to do, your sketch, and mark it out. So like here I would say I want to use tissue paper. I want to use that impasto technique. I want to use loaded brush here, okay? So actually show me that, visualize it, and when we get back, when I get back, you guys will be able to use, you'll get your canvas to start applying these these acrylic paint techniques. You do not have to use all of them. You do need to use at least 5 of them in your painting. So maybe pick your favorites, and remember, you can kind of combine some. There's no reason why you can't try a gradient with texture tools or sgraffito, or even using tissue paper and a gradient. You can certainly combine these things, so get creative and make something that you are really interested in.